Today's video was actually going to be on a northern kingdom, however, when I went to look at the Witcher map in preparation for the video, I saw another location that I realized, although it is mentioned quite a lot in the games, and borders so many important areas, we don't actually find out that much about this area. So having said that, I've decided to make today's video discussing the Blue Mountains. And I think that the best way to tackle this area is by going over each area actually located in the Blue Mountains, as well as some bordering places that have been strongly influenced by them, and I also think it's worth discussing its geographical significance to the northern kingdoms and the continent as a whole. The Blue Mountains are a large mountain range that stretches right from the very north of the northern kingdoms to the bottom of the kingdom of Angren, making it one of the biggest known mountain ranges on the continent. It borders the kingdoms of Kaer, Edirn, Lyria and Rivia, Angren, and Dol Blathanna, although many might argue that Dol Blathanna is actually located in the mountains, and I suppose is now more of a duchy than a kingdom. But regardless, this means that the Blue Mountains make up some of the border for many major and minor northern kingdoms. In fact, the Blue Mountains act as a clear signifier for where the northern kingdoms end, as to the far east of the Blue Mountains, mysterious kingdoms like Hackland and Zerrikania can be found. Working from the south of the Blue Mountains to the north, I will now discuss all the areas that are located very close to or in this mountain range, meaning if they exist at say the foot of the mountains, I would class that as being close enough. The first area is Gwendyfs, a place that I actually had a lot of confusion with, as I believe it isn't actually mentioned in the books, and in fact makes its first appearance in a game known as Arcadia, which is a sort of free dungeon game set in the world of The Witcher and Warhammer. The information I have on this location is a bit ropey to say the least, and I'll explain why soon. So Gwendyfs is said to be a fortress located in the Blue Mountains, similar to say Kaer Morhen, and this stronghold was said to be used by the Elves of the Blue Mountains that didn't wish to coexist or fight with humans. It is said to be located above 3 valleys, and the fortress's name translated to common speech means white flame, which is supposed to be in reference to its white roofs which reflect the light of the sun. It's actually even more confusing, as I believe it's supposed to even be a Nilfgaardian name. So this information is information I have found through a quote on the CD Projekt Red forums in 2009. I believe the reason it exists on CD Projekt Red's Witcher 1 map is because they collaborated with whoever made Arcadia when making this map. So because of this, to game canon, I believe it is technically a canon location in the games. However, I take all this information with a grain of salt. The next location is Dol Blathanna, which of course I have already made a full video on. For the basics, it's a valley located at the foot of the Blue Mountains that also has its own villages etc, and at least at the end of the Witcher books, it is controlled by the sorceress known as Francesca Findabair. And if you want to know more about this place in particular, I have made a full video on it, so go and check that out if you want to. Going north of Dol Blathanna, you can find the Pontar River that has played a key role in many important Witcher battles and has actually been a fairly significant location, at least on the whole, in the Witcher games. For example, in The Witcher 3, it acts as an almost dividing line between what Radovid controls and what Emir controls. The source of this river, at least if you go by the information set in the Witcher book, The World of the Witcher, is located in the Blue Mountains, which I think is a pretty interesting bit of information. Moving up from there, we now arrive at the ruined city of Loc Muinne, and the small elven town known as Hamlet. Loc Muinne is a fairly big subject that I hope to cover in full in the future, but for now you simply need to know that it's located in the foothills of the Blue Mountains and once belonged to a species known as the Vrans. However, the Vrans were pushed out of this city by the Elves, and then later the Elves were pushed out by a human known as Mylan Raupanek, who sacked the city, leaving it in the state we see it in today. Mylan also sacked Hamlet, which was a small elven town located fairly close to Loc Muinne. This town was actually the place where human sources were trained in the ways of magic by Geoffrey Monk. Loc. As I said, this is just very basic information, and I will cover both of these areas in the future, and I actually really want to do a video on Loc Muinne, as it's one of my favourite places that we go to in The Witcher 2. North of Loc Muinne, at the foot of the Blue Mountains, is the city of Ban Ard, home of the Sorcerer's School of Ban Ard. I have also made a video on this Sorcerer's School, but all you really need to know is that this is the place where most male northern mages were trained in the ways of magic. It's basically the male equivalent of Aretusa. As for the actual city, it's said to be one of the key Kaedweni cities, of course because of the Sorcerer's School, but also because of the Ban Ard Armoured Banner, which is a highly esteemed formation in the Kaedweni army. Other than that, it is known for being an area where the main industry is mining. This brings us to the final location, and I would argue that this is the most well-known location for us in the Blue Mountains as people who played the games or read the books. This location is the Witcher's Fortress of Kaer Morhen. Kaer Morhen is located in a hidden valley in the Blue Mountains, and it is here that witches belonging to the School of the Wolf are trained. I have made a video discussing this area in the past, but to be honest, I would like to cover it in more detail, and I think in the future, I'm actually going to try and break down the keep as well as the locations in the valley itself, as honestly my Kaer Morhen video was more of an overview of the area, and I really feel like it's one of those areas that I can sort of go in on and really explain to you all of the lore about it. However, for the purposes of this video, all you really need to know is that it is a keep located in a hidden valley in the Blue Mountains, and technically it is part of the northern kingdom of Kaedwen. However, I doubt the rulers of Kaedwen even know how to get there. This brings us to the end of today's video, but before I end today's video, I briefly want to discuss the inhabitants of these mountains, as well as the general terrain that can be found there. The peaks of the Blue Mountains have been described as barren, rocky and harsh, with little food and even less wildlife. These peaks are where the Elves, who originally lived in areas such as Dol Blathanna, were forced to live. However, you could argue they could simply coexist with humans, except if you know the Elves of the Blue Mountains, they would rather die than lose their identity and live in a human's world. It was said that long ago when humans arrived, species like the Vrans and werebubs were also pushed into the mountains. However, I believe they were also pushed into forests, etc. And as with places like Loc Muinne, the Elves are guilty of doing stuff like this too. Basically, the way I see it, for the Blue Mountains part, it's an area that humans do not desire to control, so it seems to be a place where those who are no longer in power are driven to until they go extinct, or in the Elves' case, coexist. Also, there is a little bit of confusion surrounding the actual name of these mountains, as in the books they are referred to as the Grey Mountains and the Blue Mountains. There's no real explanation for this inconsistency, but I personally think the books are just trying to put it down as like a regional difference type thing. I mean, if you think about it, the Blue Mountains are so large, so perhaps people from, say, Angren call them the Grey Mountains, but people in Kaedwen call them the Blue Mountains, as geographically they both border the Blue Mountains, but are so far apart. Anyway guys, that's it for today's Witcher lore video. I'm really happy to have finally covered this area, as it is mentioned so much throughout the games and the books, and technically is one of the areas that appears in all three games, it appearing through Kaer Morhen in The Witcher 1 and 3 and Loc Muinne in The Witcher 2. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty important area. Anyway, be sure to like today's video to support videos like these, and to let me know you want more, and also be sure to subscribe for more Witcher videos, as I make them every week, and if you subscribe, you won't miss them. My question for this week is, which area in the Blue Mountains would you like to visit the most in future Witcher games? This could be Ban Ard, Dol Blathanna, or maybe even areas we've already been to, like Kaer Morhen and Loc Muinne. I personally would love to see somewhere like Ban Ard, to be more specific, the Academy of Ban Ard, as we've never really seen a magic school before in the games, but of course seeing a duchy controlled by an elven sorceress would also be pretty awesome, so it is a tough choice. Be sure to follow my Twitter, and as always, a big thank you to the Patreon pledges. You guys are honestly so amazing, and thank you all so much. I really appreciate your continued support, and I'm glad to put all of your names at the end of these videos. Also, just thanks to all of you that like, subscribe, and comment, as I really do appreciate that too, as it's just so kind. But anyway, that's the end of today's Witcher lore video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have an awesome rest of the week.